Thank you.
Cool. Russ from Relato.
So there are no slides. I was told that demos are better than slides, so I took it to heart. But of course, we start with the website so we can plug ourselves. Relato is a startup. We do lead generation. So we integrate with your Salesforce database, and then we suggest new companies and contacts you should go after. Our mission is to map the markets that make up the broader economy and then use this knowledge to do lead generation. So this was actually the first site that we scraped. It's Hortonworks' website. And you can see this is their partners page. So there are like several hundred partners on here. It's of a wide variety of companies. Oh no. I'm not sure how I bring another window up. Let me. Oh, cool. Right, so I was told to demo. So that is the wrong window. So that is me scraping that site. And so you can see Selenium coming up. It's loading that page. When it's done loading, you see the spinning thing. It'll return the HTML, CSS to the process. Takes a minute. And these are sort of JSON that contain the partners of that page. So we compile these. The hard part is not scraping one page. The hard part is learning the regular expression that any page has. So there's some work there. But there are other kinds of relationships as well. For instance, many companies publish their example customers. So again, here's Hortonworks example customers. So we scrape those as well, and then we need to know who to contact. So most every company lists their management team. So it's a little bit more difficult if you're after like an analyst or something, but if it's a VP, C-level executive, which is quite often the case, we get that too. And so thank God we use SVG because this resolution is very low. So this is sort of a map. It's a demo based on a demo we did for a customer. This is based around a company in the med tech industry called Cerner. This was one of a prospective customer's top customers, and they had like 27,000 customers or something in their Salesforce database. So we were just like, well, let's take one company and sort of show you that neighborhood. And that's what we did here. However, we can, of course, use their CRMDB to show you. So what I did was I took web technology data. So there's like databases you could access that show all the web technologies any given business uses. And in this case, so this is as though we're like Microsoft, and we're like, we want to see who uses Azure. So Azure is up here, and these companies that are emboldened are Azure customers, and the ones that are clear are not. And so you can sort of, so for instance, this, so these are actually AdWords that characterize that group. It's just sort of something I threw in there. But these, so sort of this, partners of this company sort of are very dense in Azure. So if you were selling Azure, you might really consider these other companies. So this is sort of the idea behind things. You can also, I think here, filter on AdWords. So what I actually want to be demoing is like filter on company size, but we get that data from a third party, and I can't really share it on the web. So that's why this stuff is there. So there aren't actually that many companies in this medtech. Let me think of something. Medical. So there's actually, quite a few companies that have medical in their AdWords, and then these are the AdWords that they most often have. So because it's SVG, you can kind of zoom in and out, etc. You can even like find the right the node you want or whatever. There's Cerner. So if we can do this for like one company, we can do it for entire markets. This is the entire big data market. It's the top 306 or so companies measured in terms of partnership connections. And so you can see sort of big players here, like Microsoft, et cetera. What's that? I can't read it at this resolution. But anyway, you can, and then there are sort of, this color is cloud computing, so you have like Amazon Web Services, Google. This is new data platforms, so you have MapR, Cloudera, Hortonworks, and Pivotal. So that's actually who this map was based around. We started with the 4 Hadoop platform vendors. You might have heard of Hadoop. It's like a big sort of database thing for unstructured and semi-structured data. And the big data market sort of arose as a result of these 4 companies. Well, as a result of Yahoo developing Hadoop. It became really cheap to store large amounts of data, and then people started doing it. And so that's sort of where big data came from. And so this we actually use. The other thing we do is to, we wrote a market report with O'Reilly called Mapping Big Data, a data-driven market report. They made me like use a nice picture. The picture that I usually have is that one.
Yeah.
And it's much better. But they said, we want to appeal to a broad audience, Russell. And so give us, this was one of the rejects from this photo shoot, you know, but, so I listened. But yeah, so you can sort of, you can do the same stuff here. So these are AdWords that characterize this neighborhood. So in fact, you would be like filtering by revenue or employee size. Generally speaking, that's what you're actually interested in when you're querying leads. That's like probably the main criteria that you look at, or industry or something like that. So if we understand markets, then we can make market level insight. And so this is a Circos chart. It's really hard to read at this resolution. This is the connections between clusters. Oh wait, let me go back one sec. So this is the color code to that chart, which is, I'm zoomed in on a part of the report. So you can sort of see servers, old data platforms, new data platforms, analytic software, cloud computing, and enterprise software. So what we can do, we look at your customers and the broader market, and we show you like what spaces are you in, what spaces could you be in. So we do sort of market level analysis as well. And so we extract this information from the connection data, and so this is sort of stuff that we have that others do not have. So it's very useful. This isn't just like some code someone entered. We're saying that these companies actually collaborate in this market. And so it's pretty neat. And so if we know what clusters there are, well, how do companies connect between those clusters? And so that's what this chart shows. So here's old data platforms, has an enormous connection, as you might expect, to just generic enterprise software. I knew when there were 2 per row where all the insights were. Let me see if I can tell. So you can see enterprise software much more connected to old data platforms than cloud computing and servers and analytic software and new data platforms. It's because these markets are newer, so they're sort of still pale in comparison to the old school stuff. This shows how cloud computing connects more strongly to these markets than they connect with cloud computing. So it's just sort of illustrating the newness of cloud computing again. This shows that new data platforms connect more with analytic software than old data platforms, which is to say they are more data-driven, which is like a great thing to know if you're selling analytic software. I don't know what the rest of these mean. They're just sort of, these were all attempts by me to produce insight, and I think I got 3 or 4 great points out of this one. This is supposed to be interactive. You like click here, and then you see those connections, but yeah. So we put that kind of stuff in this market report, and so yeah, so that's actually content. This will be out at the end of September. We wrote it for a Strata conference. And that's our deal. So what you would actually get is not, so we deliver a map just because it's neat and it sort of shows what we're talking about, and because you can query it to get insight, but actually like our bread and butter is a list of leads to go after. And so right now we just started working with customers. So we're interested in people that want to sort of alpha test. And the way that goes is you give us your customer list and we give you like some leads we think are good, and you either agree or disagree, and we give you a little map. It's not enormous, but it covers some stuff. And if you like those leads, then we sort of engage with you commercially, and we do some lead stuff. And then as a second step, we do some market stuff, like what market are you in and what market should you be in. So there's sort of two levels of service that we provide. So that's about it. Any questions?
When you're actually giving the leads, are you providing contact information, so
Yeah.
email, cell phone, or not cell phone, but emails, phone, that kind of thing?
So we provide names. I don't know yet if we provide emails and phones. We're still figuring that out. I have not yet, but that sounds like a good idea.
I mean, I spent some time looking at your product in the past few days, and I thought it was very interesting. And one of the applications I thought also was like also maybe like in account management in the future, like instead of just doing sales, just looking at if you're a large sales organization, how to better manage like your own account internally, or how to expand the web to web sales and stuff like that.
So like sales strategy kind of stuff?
Yeah,
Or-
something like that.
Yeah, that's definitely of interest. We're sort of working.
Because you have a big Salesforce, so then you can measure which area is doing what and how they relate together with the different clients.
One thing we looked at early that we sort of didn't go with was who do you assign to what lead? So it tends to be by market and territory. But what if it were completely dynamic? Like the guy that sold this kind of company last week gets this week's lead of that type. There were a number of organizational barriers to doing that, which is to say that the salesmen say hell no. And so that we didn't go with that idea. We went with this one.
What were the organizational barriers?
Just
Salesforce organization?
yeah. When we spoke with sales analysts primarily about this, and they just said that it was too radical. That there were fights about the way leads were given out at the moment when there was overlap, and that we would create a lot of uncertainty in the way that was done, and no one would be quite sure what exact territory was theirs. So I think if you did this within a department or within a region, maybe it would work better, but we were talking about sort of dividing them by any one of like a dozen properties, and at that point accountability becomes difficult.
Do you have a way of servicing business relationships that aren't on the company's website? So does it have to be declared relationships, or if there are other kinds of partner or customer relationships
So at the
that are out
moment,
there, do you have other sources?
yeah, at the moment we can look at partnerships, example customers. We're able to infer competitors, and then we can look at like social media followers. So the one we have a bunch of data on is partnerships, but we're looking at sort of all of that.
Okay.
So it needs to be published somewhere. We do get people like, when we were working on this, that are like, oh, we published our partnerships, so we could probably update that quickly if people do so.
Is that common outside of tech?
It's common in tech and tech-savvy businesses. So it may not be a technology company, but sort of tech-centric. Yeah.
Russ, you mentioned you're pulling in AdWords data, like keywords. How are you getting that stuff?
Spy Food.
Spy Food?
Yeah, check it out. It's cool.
And how does that relate to?
So I needed to do some kind of complex or simple query, and I really wanted to use the company info. However, I can't. It costs money, and so I can't give that out. Therefore, I was like, well, what data do we have? What can we get? And so we had looked at AdWord data, and so I sort of threw it in there as. There are some people that have been interested in that, but it's really just sort of a demo
Yeah,
thing.
a whole tool just to sell to marketers.
Yeah. We sort of looked at that. But
Mapping keywords by relationships and advertising.
yeah. If you're interested in that, let us know. Anyone else? Yeah.
How long does it take to create
It varies by the number of customers that you have. It isn't at the moment sort of all put together to the point where you just like connect the app to Salesforce and then it works. It takes usually like on the number of days to work with a new customer, that level of thing. We sort of talk to them individually at this point, you know, like in person often, and then we go ahead with the demo.
And then do you only just use publicly available data, or do you actually get into the client's databases and look for?
So yeah, we use your CRM database to determine which companies that we know about our customers and which aren't. So it needs to be in our graph for us to know about it, but generally there's quite a lot that are, and there's an abundance of data as opposed to like not enough.
How does that get updated?
So if we have an existing map, we have a list of partners for each company. So we scan your customer list. We pull out those companies that have those customers of yours that have published partnership data, and that's some proportion of them. And then we walk out from there and look at those companies' known partners, and then you get one of these maps.
Who are your biggest customers right now?
So we actually just started in the last month working with customers, so I can't really say. I don't have like a user story yet, but I hope to soon.
That's all right. Just curious. Thank you.
So we have to give the data to you? I mean, like how does it work?
So we need to know who your customers are. And so,
We give the customer data.
yeah, you give us the customer data, and then we have the rest of the data, and we build you
What
a
about the security or whatever? The
so-
opportunities, customers, what is it?
So we take like converted opportunities or closed accounts. So we look at that
But
field.
it can be confidential, right?
Oh, it's always confidential. Yes.
Do you hash the data?
So we store the fact that you're a customer completely separately from the application. So that data, generally speaking, is never online until you open your app. Like it's under password, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have specific security requirements for that data that we would
Yeah,
need to
because
meet?
I work for a security company, so their data is pretty confidential.
So what security companies have universally said is we cannot give you our customer list. The fact that they're a customer is highly like secure, and you can't know that, so we can't use your product, unfortunately. If that weren't true, that would be cool. I'd be happy to do encryption in a certain way or anything that would be required to service your company.
No.
One thing I was also thinking is that, can you, like knowing a company and their general business model, map what you should find, who should be their customer versus who they have in their database?
Yeah, so we're focused on lead generation as opposed to lead scoring, but we do generate a score in the process of doing lead recommending. So yeah, we can. So there might actually, we haven't done this yet. It's easier to get customers from people than their entire CRM database.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would maybe have a third kind of node, which is a lead, with something that lets us connect them with the company. We haven't done that yet, actually. Okay, well, thanks very much.
Thank you very much.